Now, the Bram Weinstein Show on Washington's new home for sports, ESPN 630.
Hey, babies. Hey, babies. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. What's up?
Not much. How's practice?
Fine. It's fine.
Fine.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Sound like the teenager that got back from high school.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
What'd you learn today? I don't know.
Not much.
Do you have any homework? No.
Brian Robinson didn't practice, if you care about the machinations of the roster heading down the stretch.
It's fantasy implications.
If it were up to me, I would IR him personally, just because why?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Hamstring injury, what's the point?
Right.
Like, I want him here next year. You know, I'm going to do this not this week or probably next, maybe the week after. I want to go through the roster. Who we keeping?
Yeah, sure.
You're not losing everybody, and he's one of them that I want. I like him.
Right.
So I would be protective of him. I don't just he has a hamstring injury. What's the point? This is trending towards he's not going to play this week. Then you get the 49ers in Dallas. guys. So that's just me on that one. That's just me on that one. And you know, why not get a better look at Chris Rodriguez? You might as well.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead. All right, let me start with what's happening in Virginia, which, as Rick Snyder tweeted very appropriately above a quote tweet of a state senator. And so it begins, winning the Richmond State House for a Northern Virginia project is never easy. This was not a done deal that Ted would move the Capitals and the Wizards to a new proposed development in Potomac Yards, which is near Alexandria.
Yep.
Right near National Airport. But, you know, the way it was kind of presented felt like it kind of was because Glenn Youngkin was there and the mayor of Alexandria was there.
Right.
Both of them touting this is going to be amazing, amazing, amazing. And the Monumental people are, and this is, I'm not going to share why I know a lot of this, but they are full bore this is happening. Like, this is not a ploy.
Not like the then Redskins ploy, like where they did their own thing and it fell apart.
This may fall apart, but not because from what I've surmised from talking to people within their thinking, this is not that. They are actually wanting to do this and not try to pull a fast one to get DC to do what they want them to do.
Got it.
Doesn't mean that, you know, it won't fall apart because it does have to pass the city council in Alexandria, but first and foremost and more importantly, the State House. And remember, the State House is under Democrat control now after this election. So this is what I thought was interesting. Glenn Youngkin putting himself up there saying this is happening. And I'm sitting there going, how does he know this is happening? His opponents on the other side of the aisle are the ones that are going to ultimately determine whether this will actually pass through.
Yep.
But because they were up there and touting it, it made me feel like it's going to. The other group that has to approve it is the city council, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of pushback because there's probably a lot of constituents that don't want this to happen.
Right.
I do believe that the State House passes it. I do believe they'll steamroll the city council one way or the other. That there will be no stopping it at that point, even if they complain. And they'll have to kind of faux complain because I think they know they're going to be steamrolled. So the bottom line is, will the State House actually pass this? If they do, clearly it's going to be signed by Glenn Youngkin. It is a massive amount of public money to go into this, like a absurd amount, really, of public money.
Especially because they didn't say that at the initial press conference either. It then came out it's like total is $1.2 billion.
Correct.
And there was there an actual breakdown either? I don't think there was, but everyone is assuming majority is going to fall on Virginia. I mean, Monumental's only going to put up so much money.
I was talking to Michael Phillips, who's now covering the Commanders for the Washington Times since Matt Paris left, and he, of course, did it for years from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and he's actually been the point man of Washington's stadium for the Commander Stadium in Virginia because he, you know, has all these relationships with everybody in Richmond and was really on top of what was happening with Dumfries and Woodbridge and all that stuff. And so I was talking to him today because I saw him at practice, and he was also like, I think this is happening. I also feel that way. The Monumental people, the way I talked to them about it, they were, I hope I'm not sharing too much, they were pleased that I was quote unquote rational about it as opposed to a lot of other people that had an emotional reaction to it, which I don't think is wrong to have the emotional reaction or what is going to happen to DC and that area specifically of town if they do actually pull out and move away.
Right.
But he's where I am, and when I talk to them, I really got the sense this is not a ploy. It still may not happen, but you know, who knows. Anyway, as Rick Snyder points out, and so it begins, Eloise Lucas who is the president pro tempore of the Senate of Virginia, so she's got a big voice down there in Richmond, said this on Twitter. Anyone who thinks I'm going to approve an arena in Northern Virginia using state tax dollars before we deliver on toll relief and for public schools in Hampton Roads must think I have dumbass written on my forehead.
Wow.
So that's pretty pointed criticism of, I am not for this no matter what you say to me. Mm-hmm. And she has a power position down there, which is why I go back to, remember, if this was a Republican-led House, this is going to happen down there. But because it's not, and because Glenn Youngkin wants it, there is going to be some screaming and yelling. And, of course, constituents are going to be mad about kickbacks to billionaires. Always. Right. That's an always situation. I still think it's happening. I'm still going 80-20 it's happening. If for some reason it doesn't, then it would probably lead you to believe they'd have an issue with a Commander Stadium. But I don't know. Would they feel differently about it? I don't know.
Right.
So I think it's Ted or nothing. But there is this part of me that goes, if this thing doesn't happen for Ted, then will it be revisited with the Commanders, or will Glenn Youngkin throw up his hands and say, I'm not going to do this twice, to find out only the second time they also will not approve a whatever amount of money to rebuild Commander land, wherever that may be. And my guess would be more like Loudon as opposed to Potomac Yards, because they're not going to fight twice for the same spot. So my gut would be, well, then the Commanders would go, well, we'll do the Loudon on the Silver Line and keep our practice facility out there, period. And that's what's going to happen.
It also matters what the cost is. Like, if
Correct.
they come to the Commanders and go, here's this piece of land that we're going to give you, but you're responsible for a majority of the construction costs and all of that, that's a different animal than what this is, which is $1.2 billion in a tight piece of land that will have to have the infrastructure, revamped some way. We all know it can't stay the same, so it is a massive undertaking. That's what matters here as well. Like, I think you and I have already come to the conclusion, like, DC really never stood a chance because DC can't hand them what Virginia's handing them, which is
or Maryland.
Well, yeah, true, and that's a new arena, practice facility for both teams. And by the way, that's not just like a practice facility. No, that's a new ice rink somewhere, which is a massive undertaking. That's a new basketball court, which is another undertaking as well. Plus the amphitheater, plus the restaurants, all that stuff. Like, I think this is why you and I had kind of come to the conclusion of, Virginia was just offering way more than DC ever could, because renovating the arena doesn't get you all of X, Y, and Z.
Which is why I felt like before this Ted thing happened that the Commanders were going there in the end.
Yep.
That's what I thought would happen. That's why I kept saying I'm putting them in the pole position. They're going to have more money, more land, total redevelopment. It's for all the reasons I've cited before. Demographic growth, population growth, tech money, a lot of businesses coming there. You've got either National or Dulles Airport literally right there. You do have spots right on a metro line on either side. That's why I think in the end they're going to be the ones to get it. And then Glenn Youngkin got real squirrely about the Commanders, which was obviously they've had their eye on doing this instead. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think they can do both, but I don't put it out of the realm. I don't think the politicians can swallow to their constituents two projects like this.
That's right.
Because that would be $2 billion of tax money to get all the teams over here. But I'll say what I said about the initial Dumfries Woodbridge Commanders thing, now well over a year ago when that fell apart. But when it was happening, I said it at the time. If you want to get a professional team, this is your chance. If they blow it here on Ted, which then would lead you to believe they're going to blow it on the Commanders too, because if they can't pass it for that group, why would they be able to pass it for this other group? Right. Then they will get none. And they will have no professional teams there in perpetuity.
Right, exactly.
Because I don't think the Nationals are going anywhere for a while. I do think it's possible at some point, but I don't think it's going to be for a while. And then if Ted stays in D.C. one way or the other because this deal blew up, well, they're not going anywhere for a long time. And once the Commanders build their new stadium, it's 30 years.
Right.
Period.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
Wherever, whether it's Maryland or D.C., it's 30 years. So they have to make a choice here. Do we want to have professional sports in Northern Virginia one way or the other? And the time is now. And if you don't do it now, you will not get any of them. Right. So I do think in the end, the Ted thing is going to work. I think he preemptively has tried to jump the line on the Commanders while they try to figure out whether they get RFK or not and put Virginia on the hook. Do you want teams? Do you want them right now? Do you want to do this redevelopment? And at least some corners of that state, and a lot of them actually do. They want to make this happen. So I'm still 80% this is going to occur. But until the politicians agree to it and pass the legislation, and that may change, like the amount of money it sounds like that's going back to build this thing, there's going to be a lot of people that are very angry about a billionaire getting these kind of concessions. Maybe those numbers change a little bit. Maybe. They go, maybe. I think this is going to happen. I don't think it's a ploy. I really do think it's going to happen.
I'm glad you just mentioned the Nats because our friends over at Talk Nats did write an article yesterday that I think you'll like the headline of. 2037 is right around the corner, and it is not too early to start speculating about Nationals Park.
Sure. But that is a long time.
Sure.
I mean, right around the corner is 13 years.
Sure.
It's a long time.
But what Stephen Mears wrote on this article was Nats Park is constantly in the bottom half of rankings, and it's not that old.
It's not. It's also in a neighborhood where a lot of young people live and redeveloped, and
Sure.
so you'd think they would do okay. I think winning has something to do with it. I've said this before, and it's just a bit of a knock. I don't love it as a ballpark venue, personally.
That's essentially what they're getting at, but they also mention as
It's
well.
not Camden Yards. It really,
yeah, of course.
it's not like
no
a.
one's
It's
Camden
not.
Yards.
It's not a gem. Well, it's not
Sure.
Fenway Park. It's not Wrigley. It's not a gem like
Right.
that.
But what he also said was, the Nats, if they could probably have redone things, would probably do a retractable roof because of all of the rain that now is just like normal that screws up games, doubleheaders, whatever.
And there's no way of doing that now.
It's cost prohibitive is what they explored in
There's
this
no
article.
way. No way.
So he was just saying, maybe it's not too early, but it is worth mentioning that, it's 15 years away, but you don't know what could be, happening. And it's worth saying Ted was one of the ones that would possibly want to buy the Nationals. And you and I both know Ted's going to do whatever he wants to do, whatever makes the most money. So I'm just pointing that out, though, that it's already being explored with them. So,
yes.
Anyways.
Now, if this does get pushed through, right, let's just say this happens, I do think it would be possible. I don't think they would do two, but I do think it is possible if they could push this through to say, let's get the Commanders too. And here's one of the reasons why. So I didn't recognize this part of the Commanders' deal with the state until recently, which is why, like, when we kept talking about Maryland or D.C. are the front runners clearly to get them, at least a stadium and maybe more because FedEx Field could be turned into something. And that smelled like practice facility at worst, Commander land type of thing. But I didn't remember this part, and this part is important. They did a deal with FanDuel with
That's
them.
right. Yep.
To keep that FanDuel deal, they have to keep the footprint in Virginia in one form or another.
Yep.
They don't have to stay at the current practice facility at Ashburn, or they could and renovate it. That's going to happen one way or the other. They're either going to renovate that or they're going to move to another spot. But to keep that deal with FanDuel as part of the legislation, they must keep a footprint in Virginia. So they would forfeit that if they do move the entire operation out of the state.
Yep.
So does that matter? Maybe. Like, could Maryland entice them with the same money from that type of, but they already have, Fanatics has
That's right. Yep.
a sports book, right? But would they forfeit that in the state of Virginia by leaving? I would think Maryland or D.C. would have to come to the table with something to make up for that because they're going to lose that by doing it. And so that could be a prohibitive part. So that's the part that gives me pause about them moving everything out of Virginia. My gut would then say to keep that deal with the state of Virginia, that they would work with them on a new practice facility at minimum.
Right.
But it also opens the door for, if we're staying here and we're redeveloping a stadium, maybe we give back or sell off the Ashburn land, put the practice facility at wherever this new stadium is going to be. The question is, can those politicians actually stomach two public subsidy deals like this that are both in the $1+ billion range? And while Virginia's flush to do it, I have a hard time buying, like, you think she's saying I wrote dumbass on my forehead once. What do you think she's going to say twice?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And not let alone if it's just for a practice facility and you're not bringing in people driving over on game day and getting the revenue that way too. Like, it is not player salaries are player salaries, but you're not going to make that money up anytime soon.
Right.
If you're just building a practice facility like that, at least you can make the argument, hey, Caps and Wizards, that's bare minimum 82 games a year, not including the concerts and whatever else is going on there.
In the playoffs,
you can,
there's a lot there.
Correct. You can make the argument there.
Ted's filled his arena with a lot of shows.
Correct.
Of course, with a brand new venue like that, he'll get more of that type of stuff.
Right.
I think, we've been like, every time he says, well, we're going to put stuff at Cap One, I'm like what?
Right. You're going to reduce the capacity and then not bring in Dua Lipa to the 18,000 one? Yeah, no, it's not going to happen.
Correct. Like next summer, we're going to see Olivia Rodrigo. She will not be playing in the 10,000 seat arena. She's going to be playing in the 18,000 seat arena. So he's going to cannibalize himself. Clearly, he knows that.
Yeah,
I mean, like Cap One is going to become, it's going to be a white elephant.
Yes.
And I would even argue to DC, I would not put any kind of money into infrastructure for the thing for now, because you'd need a promise of how many dates of things are going to happen. And I don't think he can promise them that, even with the Mystics, because there's not enough dates on the calendar for them. Even if they are a success in that venue, it's only 20 home games. It's not enough dates to warrant putting hundreds of millions of dollars into renovating it in the way that they want to renovate it. That doesn't work to me.
Now, there is one thing, just to bring it back to the Commanders, is to offset the Virginia sportsbook thing. They could do exactly what they did with Ted, though. They could let the Commanders open up a sportsbook in D.C., and then in that point, my theory might be correct. They open it up, I don't know, let's say it is FanDuel. Let's say they get the FanDuel casino. I'm just throwing them out there.
Yeah.
They say they do the FanDuel sportsbook at the RFK site, right?
Correct.
Well, nothing would stop them from once again keeping the Fanatics sportsbook in Maryland, because it's totally different. So
they could.
So I'm just saying, like, there could very well
be a vacant lot of land. In a building that might get torn down. Remember that part.
Well, with the Fanatics one, my theory would still go back to that's where the practice facility goes. That's always been my theory the whole time. So all of a sudden, you could have a sports book wherever your Commander land is in Landover, if that was the plan moving forward. So I'm just saying, if they move to one jurisdiction, there is still the possibility of them being able to have one.
To put it this way, like, Ted made a preemptive move. I don't blame him.
Yep.
And he actually has pole positioned himself to wedge between Washington because, all right, so here's two things that are happening. Like, if Washington loses Caps and Wizards, there's no guarantee, because they don't have control of the RFK land, to get the Commanders, so they could strike out on all of it.
Right.
If Virginia doesn't move forward with Ted, then it would be reasonable to believe they're not going to move forward with the Commanders either, because they couldn't pass through public subsidy to do it, and there's no chance that the Harris Group's going to pay for this thing by themselves. I don't blame them.
Of course not.
And especially with this stuff on the table, which means Youngkin strikes out on all these teams, and that's where Maryland goes, come home, boys. And that's where I think we are. I think what Ted has done, like, just strategically, I know everyone hates, emotionally what he's doing here. Strategically, it was definitively the right thing to do if I was sitting in his office thinking through everything that might happen. Because what is the worst case scenario that's going to happen to him? That he has to go back to D.C. and stay in Cap One?
Right.
That's the worst option. And it's not the one he clearly wants, but it's not. And now that they've put money on the table, they can't really take it back. And then for him, I would then start to try to scare tactic them that I'll go somewhere else, because if the Commanders don't stay in Maryland, then he could go back to West Ward and say, do you want the same deal with us? And put our building up there. So I just think strategically he's done the right thing here, as much as it hurts to hear it and see it and believe that it may actually ethically happen to the center of Washington, D.C.
I do think the other thing here, though, is if this somehow gets stalled, let's not say stopped, but stalled, the city could look around and go, okay, you didn't tell us you wanted all of these things, or you didn't tell us when, like I said, my theory is that he probably asked for RFK and they kind of laughed at him saying,
that's what I think too.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement on that.
I think he more than hinted, like, if you're going to put RFK on the table, give it to us.
That's right. And so what I think probably happened here, though, is the city's going, you didn't tell us, or you didn't say how serious this was. Let's see if we can figure something out, because it does only take them I don't want to say find, but them trying to figure out one building that they can put a hockey rink in, that they can put a basketball court on the next floor, and then another floor with studios in it or whatever. It might not be as expansive as they wanted it in Virginia, but they could still give him what he wants.
Oh, yeah.
They would just need to figure out where it's at. It might just not be right next to Capital One Arena, right? So
Capital One Arena, or the arena that would house the Capitals and the Wizards, is not as large as a football stadium.
Right.
And therefore the land plot works better in this situation to do more of these things. All along with RFK, I'm like, look, at least this is what their dream was, before the change in ownership. They want Commander land. There's no room. I kept saying this. Like,
correct.
Even if they could get RFK, they can't build that.
That's right.
Between the stadium and the parking that's necessary to do it, you can't build all these other things out. There's just no room for that.
Right.
But with Ted Land, it's a little bit actually closer to a reality.
Sure.
It still would hurt that part of the city, but at least Muriel Bowser can tout we didn't lose the teams, and they're just going somewhere else, and it's redevelopment. It's good for everybody, and we're going to figure out Cap One, I promise. And if he remains a partner, they could go, you got to help us figure this out. Like, you got to fill that building. We're not just letting it go vacant or just be the home of the Mystics. It's just not going to be worth it to do something like that.
And I think that's where I'm getting at here is if DC can somehow find one of those office buildings that hasn't been filled since the pandemic or whatever, that is mostly empty, and either buy it off of a company or facilitate a deal that Monumental gets a building or two in that corridor, maybe not right next to Capital One Arena, but you and I both know that there are so many vacant buildings right now that are leased out or whatever. There's probably something they can do to satisfy whatever Ted wants if it ends up getting stalled and they have a chance to do it. I don't know if that's going to happen, but
I don't either.
You never know.
Yeah, I don't either. And then in the end, I felt all along, I'm like, really one of the answers is keep the Wizards downtown and give the Caps their own arena. And maybe it's not as an expansive thing that you're talking about, and I felt like that might satisfy everybody. If the Wizards don't leave and they're in the city, playing at Cap One in whatever version that looks like, the Capitals move fine. But if they're not willing to push this across, they're probably not willing to push across really anything. So Virginia's on the hook for, you either got to get this done or you're going to strike out. I can't imagine that they're going to be able to pass anything through if they can't do this. And then Maryland's sitting there waiting, going, we're ready, guys. I mean, they've been saying this for months. Like, we're ready. Just come on over here. And the Commanders wisely are waiting out RFK, not only just for a leverage point, but just to see, do they really want to go back and do it? And because Roger Goodell publicly stated, that he wants to do this, and Josh Harris and Mark Ide and Mitchell Rails are like me. We went to the stadium as a kid down there, and it's hallowed ground, and it would make the news cycle would be good if they said we're returning to RFK.
Of course. No, absolutely.
And they're going to build whatever they're going to build, hopefully like whatever SoFi East, on RFK's property. And then all of a sudden we're going home again. I could see where that's a win for everybody. But Virginia is now in a spot where if they don't get this across, they strike out with everybody.
That's right.
DC, if Virginia does this and they don't get the Commanders, they strike out with everybody. Somebody's going to look really bad now. Really, it feels like not everybody's going to be happy in the end by this. Like, someone is going to be hurting bad. And Muriel Bowser, clock's ticking, because if she loses both of those teams and doesn't secure RFK and has nobody, she will not get reelected again. They will kill her over not being able to keep things, big business in the city that needs it.
She'll be shunned from the city, in the worst way. She will have no power whatsoever.
Right.
There's one other thing I wanted to add here, too. Randy Clark, the Metro CEO, keeps coming out as well. He had a quote last night. I got this from TalkNats retweeting it as well. He said, clearly it would need some kind of modification to handle a demand of that nature. Funding is a problem. And it says, given the red flags, is it a good idea for Virginia or for Alexandria? This is the second time the Metro CEO has come out and said, no one talked to us. This is the most expensive station on the system.
And it can't handle crowds.
And it can't handle a crowd. And you and I both know this is the problem, is if you put one of these stadiums here and the station isn't built for it.
It has one escalator in and out.
It's a disaster. So
people are going to hate it.
That's right. So it's just
they're going to leave early, or they're going to show up late,
Correct.
or it's going to be all of that stuff.
Correct.
Or like people will go do it, and then they're going to realize it's such a rigmarole, and then they're going to go, well, let's drive in, and then they're in some 8-mile backup trying to get down Route 1 to get to the stadium, and they miss the first period. That's not good for anybody.
Correct. So, I mean, that's the other part of this is you guys can play Kumbaya, but Metro is going, we're broke, and you want us to renovate the most expensive station that we got here.
They're going to demand Virginia to fix the infrastructure. That's more money on their end.
Correct.
To do
Exactly.
it. And maybe that is part of the package. Maybe that's been part of it that hasn't been. We haven't seen what the total package is. There might be part of it, a X amount of millions of dollars that goes towards making sure Metro can deal with this,
I would,
and maybe widening Route 1 or something to make sure it can deal with this.
I would boldly say they haven't said anything to Metro, because I remember that Friday after there was a press conference, and I think they just called it, Metro did, just saying, we still need funding from all 3 jurisdictions. This isn't including whatever this would be the undertaking of. And granted, they have time, but still, they were not in the loop whatsoever.
I also haven't heard from the airport authority.
That's a whole other issue
DCA
as well.
is right there.
Yeah.
Anybody you know, like, I love going through there because it's the easiest one in and out in the city, especially in locale for me too. And anyone who travels knows that's the easiest one to navigate.
That's right.
Well, what happens when you're flying at 5:30 on a Wednesday, and you're already in rush hour, and there's a Caps game at 7 o'clock.
I'll double down.
Like, you're going to be stressing people out to get into that airport because it also has very few ways in and out of it.
I'll double down. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving that they always play. What's traffic going to look like over there? It's going to start stacking up at 1 o'clock because people are going to be freaking out over it. So.
We will be traveling Tuesdays.
That's right.
Is what we will be doing.
That's right.
You will learn your lesson the hard way. If you want to get out of town for Thanksgiving, you will leave on a Tuesday.
Yes. Yeah.
And you have no other choice. So we'll see.
It's a whole other set of issue. The other one, by the way, this is brought up by someone else on Twitter that lives out there. They were going, the worst kept secret in Alexandria is like, if you build anything below ground, it floods. It's all so close to the water. Whatever their construction plan, they were basically joking, whatever the construction plan is that they're saying 2028, I think is what they said. Add 2 years because there's going to be flooding as they try to build all this stuff.
Well, and they have an underground parking lot is what they're talking about.
Yeah, and that's essentially what she was saying was going, this is not going to be an easy construction concept either.
It's got visions of Meg 3.
Yeah, correct, exactly.
You're like, oh my God, everybody's car's underwater during a rain out during a Wizards game.
Exactly. Yeah. They were basically saying, like, go ask any homeowner in that area if you have a basement, it has flooded. Like, that's how it works. So good luck, guys.
Good luck, guys. One other thing on the Orioles, Lisa, another trickled piece of information came out. They will not be allowed to host a professional football game, which makes sense considering the Ravens are across the street,
got it,
or a professional basketball game. And I don't know why you would put that there, but anyway. But what it did not stipulate was you couldn't have a professional hockey game. So I think that they're going to remain open to maybe we would have a Winter Classic here. I don't know why the NHL would go there. The Capitals are popular, but
Ted tried. It was tried over a decade ago that they were trying to get the Caps to play an outdoor game there, but they hadn't played at Nats Park yet. And everybody, even the Monumental people, were essentially like, we can't go play at Camden Yards and not have played a game at Nationals Park. So wouldn't shock me if that happens down the line one bit.
Maybe. And when the Commanders get a new stadium, they'll probably raise their hand too and go, put an outdoor classic, put one of those outdoor games out here too. We're going to have a brand new sparkling new stadium.
That's
do
right.
that. I
That's
think.
right. Yeah. So that doesn't shock me at all. Ted was trying to do that before. So.
All right, let me take a quick break. Bram West's show, ESPN 630 at Sports Capital. So Aaron Rodgers is activated by the Jets. He has said he will not play, and Robert Saleh, confirmed today. He's not going to play in the final 3 games. The object here is for him to just start practicing to whatever degree that he can. So there's a couple things there for us for this weekend. That means that Zach Wilson will clear protocol and will be available. Whether he'll start against the Commanders, we don't know, or whether it'll be Trevor Siemian. But if he wasn't going to, how in the world could they activate Aaron Rodgers and not have a backup quarterback? Because he's not going to play. So that means that solves that. Zach Wilson is likely going to be available, and we'll see if they start him or not. We'll see what happens by the end of the week.
It could also be a possibility if Zach doesn't clear protocol, you could IR Zach, and then they sign another quarterback. Like, I'm just saying, there's easy workaround here.
Yeah, there is. It also, there is this part of me that goes, you are now putting 52 guys on your roster. He's not going to play, which means somebody's getting cut over this.
Right.
Not that I care, but like somebody's getting cut. Granted, he will be inactive, and whoever that other person is was probably going to be inactive, but someone lost a job over that.
Yeah. I mean, they said, though, and he talked about it on McAfee yesterday, how he is practicing with the 2s and 3s, and just having them out there is lifting morale. So it's a decision. Everyone says that they have roster flexibility, which tells me that means the bottom of their roster actually isn't filled with like young guys that haven't played or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I don't see it as a huge deal. I mean,
and also to continue practicing because they opened the window, you have to activate him. Right. If they didn't, they would be breaking an NFL rule by allowing him to practice. It means he'd have to stay away from the team. He can rehab, but he can't practice.
Yeah.
So they've determined that's important to them, that he stays on the field and literally practices, and that's their choice to make. I don't see the point of that either, but okay, because he's not going to play. He's not going to play again until August or September.
Right.
Dependent next year. Hopefully he's okay to play again, but whatever. So Nora Princadio, I love, writes for The Ringer. She killed the organization today over all of this. Her piece starts with the quote he gave September 15th, give me the timelines, give me all the things you say I can and cannot do, and then watch what I do, which was I'm going to come back, you'll see.
Right.
Of which that day I went, no, you won't. There's no doctor that is going to say you're going to be able to do that. And then she follows it up with the quote from yesterday where he says, being medically cleared as 100% is not realistic in 14 weeks, which was always the case.
Yeah.
Right? And she writes this. Well, there you have it. 2 days after New York was officially eliminated from playoff contention following a 30-0 loss to the Dolphins, and a day before the team would have to make a final decision on whether he would remain on injured reserve, quarterback Aaron Rodgers said on his weekly paid appearance on the Pat McAfee show that he will not recover from the Achilles injury that he suffered in Week 1 in time to play again. His purported bid to beat all previous timelines for recovery after surgery had fallen short. To be clear, nothing about this is surprising. Since it will not happen this season, Rodgers will most likely return to football activities with no restrictions at off-season practices in April, which puts him almost exactly in line with the recovery timeline the medical community he so resents considers typical for athletes returning from Achilles surgery. The update here is that the 40-year-old quarterback is not a medical marvel, and the one little extra % of inspiration, it turns out, was less relevant to Rodgers' return than the rates at which everyone did this whole thing, like basically like this was a waste of time. And she's not just pointing out that it's a waste of time and he became this kind of character actor of I'm a medical marvel that wasn't going to happen when it wasn't realistic. She puts data to it to say because he did this and because the Jets like leapt into it, both feet jumped in cannonball style for this thing, it screwed their season up because it changed their thinking about what they should do at the position in his absence.
Right.
And she points this out, very, very well. And she goes on and on about him basically being, I got to be the center of attention and I got to say all this stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He then claimed, because you remember a few weeks ago, he was on the field at a game and he said to an opposing player, give me a couple weeks, I'll be back.
Right. Yeah.
And then he now states that was I said that with a smile on my face. I was kidding. So as if he knew he was mic'd up when he said it.
Right.
But she keeps pointing out he kept doing this. And it goes on to say this. He goes, to take his comeback attempt seriously was to believe one of the NFL's most unreliable narrators on medical science and basic logic. Unfortunately, this is exactly what the Jets seem to have done here. Some portion of maintaining a strong relationship with Rodgers seems to depend on justifying his distorted reality. And the Jets spent the past 3 months indulging his comeback bid at the expense of actually trying to salvage their season. The team anointed Rodgers as its savior in the offseason, and when he went down 4 snaps into it, decided keeping him on that pedestal was more important than attempting to save itself. She's not wrong. The story of this season is Aaron Rodgers. And when things went wrong, the Jets refused to pivot when it was so blatantly obvious they should have.
Right.
They could have acquired Josh Dobbs. They could have acquired Jacoby Brissett, we think.
Right.
We don't know.
Right.
They could have brought Joe Flacco back. He was on their team a year ago. He's having comeback of the year conversations with the Browns, and he's going to be on a playoff team likely with them as their quarterback heading into the playoffs. If they had just brought him back and not done what they did here, which was to salvage his ego, and it makes no sense why they did it the whole time.
I'll go back to what we were talking about, though. Zach Wilson was still on the roster. They still believed in him as the backup quarterback.
But they had to bring up a real backup to the backup. This is her point.
Okay.
Right? I always, all along, when everyone complained initially they don't have a backup quarterback, I'm on your side. I said they have the 2nd overall pick.
Right.
He's the backup. That makes sense to me in the preseason. That does not bother me. Are you going to spend $10 million on Brissett to be the backup to the backup to the backup? No, of course you're not going to do that. Zach blowing up when he got put back in there, that should have been the sign when they got to the trade deadline. We better get a real player in here or we don't have any real shot to turn back to Rodgers at the end if he can do this. And I think her point is well made, well taken, and I agree with it. Once Wilson went bust, they should have done something else, but they refused to do so. And she just surmises it was to kind of stay in, good graces with somebody who seems to get irked at very odd things.
Right. I will say this. I don't have as much of a problem with them for not trading for somebody. Granted, Dobbs went for nothing, right?
Yes.
It wasn't like a 5th round pick, something
like that.
Either way, I look at it, though, they had to trade for Rodgers. So how much are you going to actually trade to just have a quarterback this season? I get it, it's a sunk cost thing, but they could have signed Flacco. They could have signed any of the other veterans. I'm on that sense of after the first 3 or 4 games under Zach, you should have signed a veteran. Like, there's no excuse.
That's the point she's getting to.
There's no excuse
I was
for
all
that.
for, once he went back in, let him play.
Let him
He's
try.
the number
Yeah.
2 overall pick.
Right.
Why wouldn't you let him play?
And he practiced with no pressure all offseason.
Correct.
Like, you and I have seen this too many times where when a guy isn't named the starter and then is sometimes thrown in there, they can actually manage a team perfectly fine.
Yes.
It became very apparent very fast, though. He was not that guy, though.
Yes. She goes on to say this. They just needed more than the league's worst expected points added per play and success rates that Wilson gave them. And she goes through all the games that he played. She goes, it's hard to see how the Jets couldn't have benefited from what Joe Flacco is giving the Browns right now, or how it was necessary for Jacoby Brissett to hang around on the Commanders' bench all year, or how the Rams saw something in Carson Wentz that the Jets didn't. The only good explanation for the Jets' failure to try to find a different solution at quarterback is that they didn't want to upset Aaron Rodgers. They were able to trade for him, after all, only because his relationship with Green Bay soured. There's also plenty of evidence that the Jets were willing to shoot themselves in the foot to assuage his roster preferences by giving all this money to Alan Lazard and making sure that Randall Cobb was on the team.
Right.
And then he said this, Boyle, Tim Boyle, who played for a while, another friend of Rodgers, shockingly did not prove to be an upgrade over Wilson and was eventually cut. So instead of making a quarterback move, they bought into a comeback narrative that was never a good bet, either because they so badly wanted it to be real or because they couldn't bear to tell Rodgers that it wasn't. So they're going to try again next year after an offseason in which Rodgers told McAfee he hopes to provide some input on personnel moves. If he stays healthy, his first season after his 40th birthday and gives New York average play, it should be a good team in 2024. But this didn't have to be about next year so soon, and maybe it wouldn't have been if the Jets hadn't been so willing to buy what Rodgers was selling. They wanted a savior. They got scammed.
I totally get it.
It's not his fault that he tore his Achilles.
Right.
Like, it's fair to say that. No one expected that to happen.
Correct.
That happened. Okay? So I absolved the team of something crazy happening in the first game that no one
First
anticipated
drive
happening.
of the first game.
But because it happened in week 1, it gave them ample time to see what Wilson was. And when it became patently obvious that they needed to go, it gave them plenty of time before a trade deadline to make a move. They refused to do a move that would have potentially moved the needle and given them a chance to do exactly what they were talking about. But they refused to do it. And I agree with her. It makes no sense that they didn't do it.
Right.
And now their season blew up and he's not going to play. 1, because no doctor would clear him. He now knows better. And 2, they're out of the playoffs because of quarterback play.
Sure.
Of their own making.
The one thing I will push back with her criticism,
This
though,
is bad organizational strategy. And bad, like, reacting to a thing happening to you.
like, I think the criticism of how they react to this is fair, but I want to push back on her narrative of, oh, you're listening to what Aaron Rodgers is saying too much. That's what you signed up for when you traded him. That's why he's not in Green Bay anymore.
But then he can't play, so you have to save your season, right?
No, I agree with that for sure, but this is what you did sign up for. Like, when something wonky happens, you know it's not going to be ideal no matter really what you do here. So, yeah, did they sign his boy Boyle? And people have questions now about your boy Natty Hacks over there too. Like, people are saying, how can you let him still be the coordinator? Well, you can, because you said to Rodgers, we'll trade for you and we'll listen to you do some of these things. I think it was a slippery slope, and here we are right now. Yes, you can knock the Jets, but that's how they got him in the first place. You had to sign up for some of this stuff.
But he tore his Achilles. He can't play.
Right.
We have to do something. You're our quarterback next year, dude. Get healthy.
Right.
But, like, we got to do something to save this season, right? Don't you want that to happen?
Right.
And they didn't. And that, to me, is malpractice by the front office and the coach. And the whole time, she points this out, and I agree. They kept saying publicly, we think he's going to come back.
Right.
Their doctors couldn't have been telling them that. How could the doctors? No doctor. Every doctor I talked to was like, he's crazy if he even tries to do it. And then I landed on, they apparently are going to let him if he's willing to, and that's stupid. You're going to let him put himself at risk again if they're 6-8? What are you, out of your minds?
The most Jets thing ever happened. We all know when you lose your starting quarterback and it's like an Aaron Rodgers, your season's over with. That's what
Most of the
happens.
time, but go look at the Browns and the Bengals
that's,
right now.
That's what I'm getting at here.
Look at the Vikings, Browns, and
No,
Bengals.
I know. That's what my point is going to be, is the Jets went ahead and said, our season's over with, but we're going to give everyone hope and distract everybody by saying maybe Rodgers comes back. And then, as you just said, the Browns, the Vikings, even the Cardinals were competitive. They didn't win, but they were competitive with a backup. And the list goes on and on and on. They didn't anticipate like 5 other teams actually staying competitive the whole time, and it makes them look exponentially worse than it actually is because everyone else also should have folded as well.
I agree, but in that division, you can reasonably believe that Buffalo and Miami are going to be good, which means you have to, on some level, keep up in some way.
Sure.
And it's an organizational failure to me to not have done this. Why Jacoby Brissett is still on this roster not acquired by the Jets makes no sense to me at all.
I agree 100%.
None. All right, let's take a quick break. Bram watches the show, ESPN 630 Sports Capital. How about John Keim today getting a birthday shout-out from Ron Rivera in his press conference, which you will hear on Commanders Daily today.
That's right.
Keim, they jokingly said he's 70. He's not. Got a cake from the assembled media. Keim has become the king of Ashburn. How about that?
Well, I mean,
deserved,
he's
by the way.
The elder statesman by far.
Uh-huh.
Who else is close to him? Nobody. So
I'm number 2 now. It's actually, and pretty. I mean, yeah, I'm number 2 by a lot, actually. It's been consistently out there for years.
Yeah.
I'm number 2.
Yeah, because I was going to say you have the.
So I need Keim to die so I can be send to number 1.
I was going to say you just have the occasional part-timers like Tom Lavero that pop out there every once in a while.
Yeah, Rick Snyder.
Yeah, those guys, but they're not every day covering everything. Yeah.
Nope. It's Keim then me. I'm number 2 now.
Tommy walks out there and it's like seeing the laser pointer. You're like, oh God, what's coming?
Well, today it's funny you bring him up. I was just slipping through Twitter and he, I guess, posted a piece which I'm going to read later. Ripping Ted Leotis.
Of course. That's what Tom does.
Shredding Ted Leotis.
Love Tommy's.
Calling him transparent Ted. Transparent. That's a fair one, too.
That's funny. I don't care what side you're on. That's funny.
He's not taking questions about Qatar, about Alexandria, all of it. Transparent Ted. So happy birthday, Keim, who will be back here obviously on Friday.
Of course.
So I was like, Keim, you're a Christmas baby. Look at you. And he said, I went home on Christmas Day.
Oh, look at that.
How about that?
Good for Keim.
He is the Lord of Ashburn. That's why it all glows around him.
Might not be anything in Ashburn soon, so.
Never know. The Lord of
Landover has a good ring to it.
The Lord of Landover.
Guess he could be that too. I mean,
Robert F. Keim Stadium. Oh man, I wonder if he's got 30 more years in him of covering this team.
JFK was right there. Huh? JFK was right there.
Oh, JFK Stadium. John effing Keim Stadium. We'll run that by him on Friday, see if he likes that.
Exactly.
Remind me. Yeah. JFK Stadium. All right. News from college football world. One is signing day. Apparently, Maryland did flip some very high corner from South Carolina to them. That's like the new, everything today is who flipped to do what. And then I saw a tweet from Danny Cannell, which I thought was hilarious, where he goes, if you're upset today that somebody flipped and they're going to your program this year, just remember the portal's next year and you can have another shot at him again.
100%.
Like it's a totally different ballgame now. If you missed out on some guy, all it takes is him either not playing enough or not liking it or give him NIL money. He'll be at your school next year.
There is another one here that I don't know if you've seen it. It happened in the last about 20 minutes. 24/7 Sports tweeted it out. The number 1 offensive lineman commit, Jordan Seaton, had committed to Colorado on December 7th.
Oh, he flipped on Dion?
He not only flipped on Dion Bram, he flipped to Maryland.
Oh, locks.
Yeah. So.
Locks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And people are kind of like.
Locks is like shut your face.
Well, I only saw this because Mike Golick Jr. actually tweeted it, and I follow each other, and he's like, I have zero issue or any ill feelings towards Colorado, but I would laugh my ass off if this is true, just because they might have flipped one of the best or the best offensive linemen in the country from whatever happened there.
When it shifted on Dion, like late September, it was his offensive line was undersized, and the good team started to steamroll them.
Correct.
And then Shador got hurt, Hunter got hurt, like it all happened. It all went downhill real fast.
Thought they had the number 1 offensive lineman, and Locks got him up.
I guess he's not going to be SI's man of the year next year, is he?
I told you that was all publicity for his Amazon thing. Which, have you watched any of that?
No.
I haven't seen an episode of it yet.
Let's see. Speaking of his alma mater, Florida State. This is from Andrea Adelson, who covers college football for ESPN. Mm-hmm. Florida State has renewed in-depth discussions about its long-term future in the ACC in recent weeks. Yeah. Sources tell ESPN when talks reignited following the Seminoles' omission from the college football playoff earlier this month. They point to the ACC as part of the problem, and I don't think that they're wrong about that. You know, if if the NCAA and the BCS wanted to not further instability, and I don't know that that's not their goal, but if they didn't, that it's interesting here that maybe they shouldn't have snubbed a Power 5 conference's undefeated champion who had beaten some very good opponents along the way, maybe didn't play the schedule Texas or Alabama played, but maybe shouldn't have done that and put them in anyway, because this is only going to fuel more. Oh, so winning the ACC is not a big deal. Undefeated ACC is not a big deal now.
Right.
That's not good enough for you anymore. And if that's the case, then it's just going to, and I understand why they're thinking this way, we need to get out of here. The important thing is at the end of this piece, which says this: any school that wants to leave the ACC would have to pay an exit fee of 3 times the league's operating budget, roughly $120 million. The question is, do you recover that by going to the SEC, which is clearly where they would go?
Right.
They also, back in the summer, started complaining, and they were saying, we want a bigger piece of the pie because we're Florida State. We're not Duke or NC State. We're the marketable group here. We want a bigger piece of the pie, and the ACC's been spreading the money out with everybody, and they're going, nobody watches Duke football games, guys, but everybody watches us.
They literally had the numbers to back them up by saying, this is how many people are watching our games comparatively to everyone else's. It's not even close. We are the number one team here.
This is one of those, after this, I would hear out the, we can't stay here. We just went undefeated in a Power 5 conference. That wasn't good enough to get into the playoff.
Right.
Like now, when they expand the playoff, that won't be a problem again. Still, I mean, they feel burned. I actually think Georgia has a better case than they do. And I don't know why not more has been made of that. They went undefeated, hadn't lost a game in 3 years. They finally lose one to Alabama in a close game, and you punish them over that. Like, I get there was only 4 and there were 6 that belonged. But I in the end, I thought, like, going into that weekend, I'm like, if they lose and it's close, I don't know how you take them out. How do you take them out?
Yeah, but it still all goes back to it was more Texas than Georgia losing it. It was
because Texas beat Alabama.
Correct.
That's why.
And you couldn't let Alabama in without them. This is one of those ones.
You had to let the SEC champion in. I'm sorry. It's the best conference in college football, and you know it. And if they won it with one loss, how do you not put them in?
This was just one of those years where it was a razor-thin margin, and they didn't let Georgia in. I mean, this is what happened.
And as you know, Texas is back.
That's right. Officially, they are back.
They are back. The other thing that's going on, and I'll talk about this next hour, is the Harbaugh to the Chargers thing is ramping up fast, real fast.
Don't do that.
Yeah, we'll do that next. Bram Show, ESPN 630, Sports Capital. Love being number 2 in the pecking order out there at Old Ashburn. Feel good. Now you're playing my song from eons ago. Love it.
Might have been my favorite concert of the year.
That was good. We saw the Hives down at that Union Stage place, which is a tiny little shoebox, and we saw a real banger band in there, so that was good.
Great venue, great band.
Yeah.
As you and I talk about now, as we both get older, we're going on at 9 and we're out by 10. You got me. I'm good. An hour, I'm good.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. I am going to hit you up to go with me to a concert of a band you don't know anything about because no one else is going to go with me soon, which is next month. I'm going to want to go see Joey Valance and Bray. I bought tickets to them, and I'm going to take.
What's the date on that?
I don't remember. Sometime in January. We won't be in the playoffs, so don't worry about it. Let's see. Where's it at, too? It's somewhere. It's a small venue downtown. These are guys that I am bullish on having a breakout in the not too distant future.
I mean, and
I'm
always
will be
down. So.
by far the oldest person in this place.
DC9? You already have tickets?
Yeah, I already have tickets to that.
Have you been to DC9?
No.
It's like right next to, it's not next to 930 Club. It's like across the street. It's like a basement. It's badass. It's just, every place in this city is great. It's just another place that you walk into and you're like, yeah, this will.
You got a Caps game that night or no?
I'm looking right now.
Okay.
It is.
Because if you can't go with me, I don't know who is.
January
That's the problem.
19th. I'm off. It's a Friday night.
Okay. That's what we're doing. So book it. Put that in your calendar.
First date I've had in a while.
We're going to be doing that. It's not going to end the way you want for sure. You're going to have to go home alone.
No,
maybe I don't know.
Have to leave with you.
I already know, like this group, I am going to be by far the oldest person in the room. But I want to see these guys because they are kind of a new modern Beastie Boys, and I'm dying to see these guys.
Their
live.
merch is badass. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah. You might know a couple of their songs are getting used in commercials now, and so you'll recognize some of the beats they do. But they are like a full-on modern Beastie Boys, and they're very, very, very good.
I was going to say here because they have small venues, obviously, that they're playing here. Sold out in Atlanta, D.C., New York, Boston, Montreal, Toronto, Chicago, Minneapolis, all sold out.
We'll see how this goes.
So-
I might go on tour with him. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
All right.
how it
Okay.
goes.
All right. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Just thanks for telling me I'm going.
I was thinking about that because I'm like, well, Archer can't go because he would want it, but he can't go. And I was like, who else?
Heather doesn't want to go to that one.
No. Nah.
Guys have different musical tastes.
Well, she's just like, what are we doing? What? And then if I played the songs for her, she'd
Who
be
is
like,
this?
how? Like, and she's gonna be like, I can't dress like I'm 22. So
That's fair.
yeah. Let's see. As I mentioned last hour, the hype train of Harbaugh to the Chargers is starting to heat up big time. And it was only, I think, pushed a little even more forward when the Chargers president did a press conference post the firing of Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco. And so now there's a GM and coach opening out there. Mm-hmm. They got Justin Herbert. And so everybody's going to be very interested in working with him.
That's right.
Sean Payton's probably like, guys, you could have had me last year.
You're late, guys.
You're late, guys. You could have, everybody knew it.
Yep.
And he was angling for it a year ago, figuring they would fire him, but they didn't. Now they did. And when the Spanos, I think it was John Spanos, did the press conference, they asked him because they're kind of notoriously, they're like the Bengals. Everyone says they're cheap.
Yeah, right.
So the questions were skirting around the, will you pay the going rate for a top tier coach, or are you going to go in a different direction? And he was upfront and pushed forward we're going to do whatever we need to do.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be prohibitive, which then led to, because it makes sense, they're going to get an established coach, not a young guy.
Right.
Because they need a culture change / they can win now. I know a lot of people may not believe that, but I do. And that's why Sean Payton wanted that job. They feel like they can win right now. And they should go this direction. I don't know if Harbaugh's the right guy, but they should. So this is just ramp it up. And last I heard about Michigan putting an extension on the table, it was you can't go look for an NFL job, and he didn't sign it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So he may, after being suspended twice this year, especially if they win the national championship, he may be like, ta-ta, boys.
I'm out, yeah.
He may be.
I've said this too as well. I don't know how Harbaugh is feeling about it, but I also know he's not the oldest, but he's getting older. I've largely felt this, and we saw it with basketball. I think these coaches hate this transfer portal crap. I think that it's already, their job is already hard enough recruiting kids, and then you have to re-recruit your own players because they can go into the transfer portal and then sign with anyone else now. I think a lot of coaches have just adapted and are doing it, but I think you're just seeing some coaches be like, I'm out on this. I do not want to do this. And he's a guy that can go to the NFL, no problem. Wouldn't shock me at all if he was going.
Well, I mean, it seems like a long time ago now, but they went with the Niners with him 3 straight NFC championship games and won Super Bowl and lost it. But so he clearly knows what he's doing.
Of course.
He's won everywhere he's been, big, everywhere. And, they tried to fire him at Michigan a couple of years ago because they were mad that he had lost an Ohio State game. And he was like, I'm 10-2, guys.
Yeah.
like, what's the problem? And then, I think he's one of those, he wears thin fast. That's what I think it is.
Yes, correct.
He's probably got that personality. And
you and I both know in college especially, you piss off a booster or two that give a bunch of money. That noise never really goes away, and that's just how it is.
He also played there.
Yeah, right.
And I saw Bieniemy's name linked, to it. I went, well, he played there.
Right.
So, I don't know. Like, the Spanos family may have good feelings about him. And with Bieniemy, too, he knows that division. He knows who you're chasing.
Sure.
The team that's won that division, which will now be 8 years in a row, that's the team you got to catch.
Yep, right.
He knows them. So, I don't know. That might be the right moment for him to get the head coaching opportunity.
It might also be the players might be more receptive to Bieniemy as well in his coaching style.
Maybe.
Because I think
They're both tough.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's what they probably need out there. You have this franchise generational quarterback. You need to get it done with him. I mean, there's no excuse now at this point.
He did, though. It has become the cult of Harbaugh, though, up in Ann Arbor. I mean, remember, there was all flashing the 4s, and the guy who was the assistant coach went on that crazy crying tirade after they won a game without him in Penn State. He was crying, full-on crocodile tears crying.
Lawsuits ready to go before they were dropped out of nowhere.
That's right. I recently watched. That's the other thing. That's not done, by the way. So we don't really, he could get suspended beyond this year. And if that's the case, then it probably is time for him to move on.
Yeah.
They didn't say the NCAA was done with it.
Right.
They said the Big Ten was done with it. That's all they said about it. The NCAA didn't do anything anyway, ever. But, who
what
knows?
do?
Yeah, but he's got a pretty good cult following going on up there. And maybe, I don't know, he might be especially if they win it all, he may feel like, ta-ta, guys.
Right.
I did my part.
I could see it.
Yeah, I could see it. I think that's a possibility. All right, I want to play the speech from Mike McDaniel, who, I made fun of him for a while, because he looks the part of nerd, wunderkind, right, off a tree. They can't all be great, right? He does, fall into a pretty good team there. Once they acquired Tyreek Hill, that's been a game changer, obviously, for them. They have a superstar, one of the best receivers, whatever. And Tua's turned his career around with him, for sure. And when you do Hard Knocks, you get views of people. I said this in the summer. I don't know if Saleh's a good coach. When I saw the clips of him, the more and more I see of this guy, and everyone keeps touting what kind of culture he's building and all that stuff, it's hard not to buy it, honestly, what's going on with him.
Can I say this, too? This is the first year where we've seen the actual Hard Knocks clips, every single week being coming out and disseminated by everyone else. We have not seen this for any of the other teams they've done at all. That's right. Like in any kind of run. The only one we saw was last year with the Cardinals when they told everyone Watt was going to retire. That was the only clip we saw at
That's
all,
right.
I think.
That didn't see right. The Colts one, same thing. We didn't see any of it.
Yeah.
We didn't see any of it.
Yeah.
And then when we acquired Wentz, I went back and watched the whole series because I'm like, well, we got him. I want to see what I can learn about him through Hard Knocks, and there wasn't much to. In fact, I walked out of it going, why are they talking so poorly about him? He didn't come off that way at all.
But this one every week, it's actually had as much buzz as the normal one on a good year, I would say.
We had the summer one with Rodgers this year. I mean, there were so many clips with the Jets.
But that's what I'm talking about. I think
in the summer one, nothing's going on. It's just preseason, so it becomes a bigger deal than the games. Honestly,
correct. So I think what's happened here though is they've actually figured out now the formula. Like they have to get a good team on this midseason one, or else no one's going to care about what's going on. And
that's right.
They have a team that's not only good but entertaining to watch too, and has really, really big players.
So this week's episode is off of their loss. Mm-hmm. They had a loss to the Titans. Remember, they blew that game on Monday night where they were up 14 with under 3 minutes to go and blew it. It was the first time in a long time, and it was to Tennessee, who's not going to make the playoffs. That's a bad loss.
Well, it's double. It was double because it aired the Tuesday after. So this was like a continuation because they only dealt with it for just a little bit. And then it was about the Jets game.
Right. It was about the Jets game, which is where this speech is. Yeah. And this is what's they always show the speeches with the coaches, and you're going to be hard not to buy into him because I think what everybody loves is for everybody in this sport, accountability does matter. Mm-hmm. And he took it here. And he's got a potty mouth. It took Callow 20 minutes to bleep this thing. All right, so this was a clip from Hard Knocks of Mike McDaniel off of the Titans loss.
I know who's in this room and what we're going to make of it. You with me? So we're going to hit this, and if it's brutal, yeah, bring that, okay? Because we're trying to do something today that other people won't. Let's just look at it straight in the eyes. It's pretty simple. We lost the game for 15 different reasons. And I have my hand fully in that, okay? Trash plan on my part against their zero. There's better than having to throw a fadeaway jumper, okay? Now, I've got a quarterback trying to overcompensate for me. I never see Tua miss any throws. I never have to coach him on throws. But the opportunities we had, whoa! And that's what's happening a lot is overcompensating for your teammates. An elite player trying to take the game in his hands. A heavy turn to try to pick this dude off. Which I appreciate the intent. But let's learn from this. Understand that we can trust each other. That was probably the quarterback's best play. That happened. Okay? Don't worry about it. Just keep playing. Yeah, I called some trash plays. That will happen. Just like you'll have bad plays. You know what makes me a man? Is that I don't blink at that shit, nor do I avoid it. I'm going to learn from that shit. You don't get mad. You don't get sad. That shit. Okay? We learn lessons. Okay? We're about to get ready for the Jets. Adios.
It's pretty good.
Adios.
It's pretty good. I mean, he just stood up there and said the game plan was crap.
Yep.
You don't hear that very often.
You never hear that, ever.
You don't hear that very often. Granted, because it's Hard Knocks, you get to see things that you don't see with other teams.
Right.
So is this happening all over the league in other places? Yeah, probably. You just don't actually see it. And I want to credit the Dolphins for letting them air that. They can pull things. You don't get unfettered access and the final edit. Yeah. The team in the NFL can tell you can't show this or you can't show that. I.e., when Antonio Brown called Mike Mayock a cracker, which I'm sure they had on tape, but didn't show it.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Like, okay. So I'm buying it with this guy. I'm starting to really buy it now because I watched that and I went, here's a guy. It probably isn't totally his fault. They were up 14 with 3 minutes to go and blew that. That is not all on him. And he stood up there and took the heat anyway. And look what happened. They turned around and the Jets without a quarterback are still bad, out. Especially on offense, but they shut him out. Yeah. Turned around, shut him out, got everything back on track. It's what you need to do. You need to manage every week. It's hard to do sometimes. And I'm every time I kept hearing all these like laudatory things about him, I'm starting to buy it now. I'm really starting to buy it.
It's also, you and I have covered sports for a long time. In the NFL, more than any other sport, NFL coaches love to tell you how much they know more than you, right? They just love to, because also they've grinded it out too. I don't blame them in a lot of sense, but they love to tell you how wrong you are and how right they are. McDaniels screams he should do that because he is the nerd, right? That's what everyone makes fun of him for. Mm-hmm. He should be the one to say, I know more than you. But there he was, standing up there going, my bad, guys. That one was on me. That takes a different set of balls to do that. I agree. With your team sitting there, too. So, yeah, I already have bought into him, but everything we keep seeing and hearing, he keeps getting better and better is what I'm looking at.
So, on the other side of that, and there's somebody who I think has been really good at this for years, is Mike Tomlin. Mm-hmm. And again, we're not seeing his speeches and we're not seeing all this, so we don't know how he's interacting in general. Yeah. But for the second time this year, he's had a receiver basically lollygag on a play, like a huge play.
Yeah.
And first it was Deontay Washington. There was a fumble, and he didn't try to he was just like gave up on the play, didn't even realize there was a fumble. Yep. And then the guy runs the other way, and everyone's like, what are you doing? Like, he wasn't even paying attention, and he apologized for that. He's like, I got to be better than this.
Yeah.
George Pickens, the other day, it's been pointed out that he refused to block on a play that might have been a touchdown had he picked up his man, but he had to go low to do the block. And he made a choice in the game not to do it. And he said, when pointed out to him, why didn't you do this? He said, I didn't want to get hurt. Said it.
Wow.
Which is, what game are you playing?
Right, exactly.
I mean, I hear you. But no one's asking you to do something out of the ordinary here. He's just like, it's possible if I throw this block, I hurt myself, and I just don't want to do that.
Go look at
what?
Go look at that game with the Seahawks and the Eagles. Drew Lock was sprinting out as a lead blocker multiple times.
In fact, on one of the touchdowns, he was out in front of it.
Yeah, he was the lead blocker. I mean, he was going to score.
But he was there.
He was still there. And there was another one that went to the opposite side of the field, and you see Lock literally sprint in front of whoever it was because every play, all gas, no brakes, as your boy Saleh would say. That seems to be what Carroll has those guys doing, and it's not the same in Pittsburgh.
Right. In San Francisco, I saw an interview with Kyle Juszczyk, who basically said, he goes, if you're not playing hard here, we will call you out. Right. All of us. We will call you out. And so that's why I don't know what's going on in Pittsburgh right now, because this is really unusual, but it's the other side of it. You've got players who aren't willing to go the distance for the betterment of their team. And when one literally says, yeah, I know the play you're talking about, I just made a business decision on it. I made a business decision on it. I don't want to block a cornerback to help my running back score a touchdown because I'm afraid I'm going to get hurt. Well, then why are you out there?
Right. That's a new one.
That's part of the game. This is the second time because Pickens was very critical of them early in the season, and Tomlin, in full Tomlin form, said that's a pebble in my shoe when he heard a complaint, which again goes back to he knows how to handle the locker room when things pop up like this and has for years. But he's clearly lost the ability to get all these guys to buy in because it's the second time this happened this year where I get it, like they didn't like the offensive coordinator and they weren't performing very well, and maybe Pickett isn't the right guy, but the good teams figure out a way to be extremely competitive and be tough outs, and they haven't been the last few weeks. That's a little on him.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I would, as good as George Pickens is, I would trade him in the offseason. I'd be like, that's it. Like, you're out, dude. Like, if you're not all in for all of us, because we're all of these other guys are putting it on the line. If you're not, we will trade you somewhere else where you want to be.
He's too good, so I wouldn't trade him because he's not like the Claypool, like the mid-round pick that they replaced with. I would do the old college suspension. Like, I would bench him for like a half and then say, you ready to go?
You ready to play
and
now?
Then hopefully that would teach him his lesson.
Let's see. Flacco is getting comeback of the year.
Comeback player of the year.
Comeback player of the year.
Votes. Who else would it be? I mean, I can't think of who.
Well, it's, I don't know. It's a small subset that we'd have to do this with. But if he gets them on some kind of like streak and gets into the playoffs with them and he keeps putting up the numbers he's putting, it's going to be hard not to look at him and do that.
DeMar Hamlin is on there, of course. But
he hasn't played
very
much, actually. He's been inactive most of the weeks, probably because they're scared to put him out on the field.
DeMar Hamlin, Matt Stafford, Baker Mayfield, that actually might have some legs.
Baker.
And Tua.
Especially if they make the playoffs.
Tua as well.
Tua off the concussions a year ago.
Yeah.
I wouldn't give it to Matthew Stafford. He had an injury, and he came back from it. And like that happens all the time. Baker, I would hear out because Baker's going to have really good numbers by the end of the year. And he was kind of they weren't even sure he was going to win the starting job in the summer.
This one feels like the fix is in. The far and away favorite is still DeMar Hamlin. They must.
Because they want the story?
I think that's what it sounds like.
Okay. All right, fine.
That's the Shield.
The other one,
Shield already crowned him before the season started.
And King Heineke is going to save Art's job if he performs. They're turning to Heineke again. He did a press conference today in a Busch sweatshirt, and he said he wore it on purpose because remember last year on the plane he was drinking Busch Light and he got fined for it.
Correct.
Because
exactly.
Stupidly, the team put out videos from the plane drinking, which you're not allowed to do.
Did he do it or social media? I think it was social media.
Somebody put it out.
Either way,
somebody put it out. And that's when Ron had to be like, guys, you can't do that. You're going to get fined. And he said we had to have a talk about it.
Let's rewind to who's in that video and who's not here anymore.
Yeah, who is in that video? Chase?
Chase was the one putting chains on him.
Chains, yeah. Well, that was chains on planes last year. Everybody's doing chains on planes.
But Chase is gone. Heineke's gone. Was Sweat in the video? I don't know if Sweat was in the video.
No.
Don't know. Either way.
Yeah. Ron wasn't in the video.
No, he was not in the video. No, he was not.
And then Arthur Blank was asked about your boy Art's future, and he said, let the season play out, and then we'll talk about it, which is get in the playoffs, dude.
Right, exactly. And by the way, on Heineke...
After losing to Carolina and scoring 7 points, I got a hard time buying he's surviving this because it looks like either the Saints or the Buccaneers will win that division, and then they won't get in.
On Heineke, too, though, I did think it was interesting. They actually were like, he's the starter for the rest of the season.
I think they have to do that, yeah.
I'm just saying they didn't do it before with Ritter either, so there you go.
I called it on your boy Zach. I called it on Mac big time early, and I called it on Ritter. I said, he ain't it.
Right.
Sorry, guys. He just ain't it.
Right.
I was calling it this summer. I'm like, by week 5 when we play them or whatever it is, he's going to be out.
Right.
Should have been.
Yes,
Should have been, guys.
Exactly.
All right, be right back. Bram, watch the show. ESPN 630 Sports Capital.